I'm not gonna lie, I'm feeling emotionally and physically drained. Not really sure what to say on this video today. It just feels like this is getting harder and harder each time. And starting to feel like there's very little hope.
This time it was really hard to say goodbye because we don't know when we're going to see each other again.
Hey guys, Akeem Scott here. I just want to say thank you to everyone that continues to fight to reunite families. I want to say thank you to the admins of the various groups that are advocating on our behalf. This Friday, I'll be going live on my YouTube channel to talk about the immigration issue at length. And I invite all of you guys to be a part of that discussion. Join in and let's talk about it.
Morning, guys. The fight.
Good morning. Morning.
Welcome. We
Thank
are
you.
a campaign that follows the Prioritized Family Sponsorship campaign and all efforts across Canada to reunite families. Guys, welcome to the show. This is a Fight to Reunite exclusive interview with Helen and Nadini. Guys, welcome.
Thank you, Akeem. Thank you so much for having us on the show. We really appreciate it. And I think this show should be taking off quite a bit because there's so much to talk about on the premise of immigration. But I'd also like to say a quick thank you as well to the many advocacy groups that are out there working on our behalf and uniting us and pulling us together, and specifically to Voices for Families for having us on. They're the ones who put our names forward, and we really appreciate the opportunity to share our stories and talk about the issues that impact us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, guys, I mean, you just said it. You said everything that I wanted to say, and we're so grateful that you're here. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, you're here because you're separated from your family, and you're still fighting to be reunited. You're a representation of thousands of other people that are going through the same thing, and we're just so grateful that you took time out to come on the show and to just be honest about what's going on, so that other Canadians and people around the world can understand the reality that we face as family sponsorship immigrants, but also advocates. So just first question, and maybe I'll start with Nadini. Nadini, could you just share your story with us, just so we can give people a little bit about a little background about what's going on?
Yeah, sure. And first, I want to just preface it by saying that my story is no different from many other stories that are out there. You hit the nail on the head when you said that, this is thousands of people going through this. So my story is not sort of unique or different because it is really representative of many stories that are out there. But also, I think it's really important to say that many people don't want to come up and show their faces and talk openly like this for fear of reprisal, for fear that their applications will be stalled, delayed, denied further. So, it is a risk for us to talk about this, but I'm willing to do so because I have 0 right now. 0 minus 0 is still 0. So, I'm just going to do it because I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm hoping that the right people watch this video and start implementing the changes that are needed within our immigration system, particularly in response to the outland spousal sponsorship process. So my story is probably similar to everybody else. I met my husband, Jonathan. He's from the Dominican Republic. I'm a Canadian. I'm from Canada, but originally I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Very close islands to each other. We have similar cultures, similar customs, except his is done in Spanish, mine in English. We met, and married in 2018. I've been to the Dominican many times prior to even meeting him. But on one particular occasion, we did end up meeting. We did not meet on a resort. He's not a guy who worked on the resort. He works in his community. He was a professional athlete, professional basketball player, for the city of Puerto Plata. And right now he trains their, children within their communities and young athletes who are in line to become professional athletes as well. And he gives a lot of his time and to the community. He's just an all-round good person and wonderful person, and that's why I married him. He is a wonderful dad to my stepdaughter. I've got a daughter from a relationship prior. I'd never been married, but this was, from my university days, and she's 15 years old. And this was our first marriage for both of us. He had no kids. We both have no kids together at this stage. So after the marriage, we applied for our first PRV. We were told that this is the only way to pull him into Canada. We had had a long discussion together. Where should we stay? Should I move to him? Should he move here? And then the agreement was, my daughter has legal rights to be in Canada. She still has her dad here. The best for us at this stage is for him to be here in Canada with me. So this wasn't a fly-by-night decision. This was us really taking time as a family to discuss where we would go. And we saw the opportunity. Canada offered the permanent residence visa for spouses. And we said, we're going to do it. And we were told in reading the process, you don't need a lawyer. So we did it on our own, and we applied on April 15th, 2019. We went through giving them everything that was necessary in the process, from photos, text messages, to logs of our phone calls, testimonials from people, shared expenses, gifts exchanged, just everything that was necessary and the valid documents to prove that it was a genuine marriage, a genuine relationship. We gave all of the background information that was necessary to form part of the application. We ended up, I went through the sponsorship approval, and I was approved. So if people don't know what aspect that is, it's really you are responsible for your spouse coming into Canada for a minimum of 3 years, financially and on every different level necessary to be, to make sure that they adapt and they fit in and that they don't weigh on the social welfare system of Canada. So I was approved for that. We do have a good job here, and I ended up getting approved really quickly for that. So no problem. My husband did his fingerprinting, also known as the biometrics. He did his medical, so he wouldn't weigh on the OHIP system. We live in Ontario. I live in Ontario, and we wouldn't weigh on the medical system in Canada. He passed his medical, no problem. He went through a very extensive eligibility, background, and criminal check. He passed those. It took quite a number of months, and he even received police clearance from his own city in his own country of Dominican Republic. And that passed with no problems, no issues. My file was later moved to Mexico. That's the visa office that was involved. And somewhere between October to February, someone in that visa office, under the guidance of their area director, decided that we needed an interview. They didn't believe that the marriage was a genuine one. And they formed this on the basis, and they didn't tell us at the time. They don't tell you in the notes. You can order your notes through the ATIP system. They don't tell you in your notes why you're being flagged for an interview. You just get flagged, and you're just told this is the date you show up, which is about 3 weeks later. You don't have a lot of time to prepare. You try to figure out, well, why are we being flagged? But okay, we're going to go in because we have nothing to hide. We're a great couple. They asked us to bring in extra photos, trips that you've taken. And by this time, my interview was March 2020, March 3rd of this year. We had under our belt 10 trips at that time, 10 trips that we'd taken together and visited each other after our marriage. So, when you really look at it, it was like I was going down every couple months to see him.
Nadini, just a question. So how long have you guys been separated now today?
We've been separated. It's over 2 years.
Wow.
It's over 2 years. Yeah, in this process.
And have
but
you seen
officially
your husband?
The process started since April 15, 2019.
Okay. 2019. And you
Right.
and you represent the Dominican Republic. That is where your husband is at, right?
Right, and the Dominican Republic falls in a region called the Latin Americas. So it covers all of the Latin-speaking sort of countries like Colombia, Guatemala, El Salvador, Cuba, countries like that. So, which is no different from where I am. It's a stone throw away from Trinidad and Tobago, except we're the Lesser Antilles and they're part of the Greater Antilles. So, I do represent that, and I'm sure when Helen gets to her story, she'll tell you which region she represents. Because there is something systemic about this. You have to understand that it's not only to one specific country. It seems to be systemic around all visa required countries, and we'll get to that in a moment. But in general, we went to that interview. So let's just say we got prepared by providing extra photos, proof of all of our other trips, more testimonials, more records of our communication. In fact, we gave, I think it was close to 1,000 pages of text. They didn't want videos.
Wow.
So we couldn't, I know we couldn't, but we had nothing to hide. So what we did is we just downloaded our WhatsApp. I printed it off. I had a free printer at that time, and I printed it off, and I thought nothing of it. That's something to remember, and I will tell people, do not ever do that again, because anything you give can and will be interpreted and held against you. And that's exactly what happened to us in this interview. We had thought it was going to be a beautiful, wonderful, happy-go-lucky, let me get to know you interview, because they don't say anywhere on the website or anywhere that they can offer that this interview is really interrogative.
And that's an interesting point you mentioned, because I don't know much about the interview process, but you would think that it would be an interview to make sure that both persons know each other, and to just confirm the genuineness of the marriage. You wouldn't think that it would be an interrogation, because this is not a prison. It is family sponsorship.
Yeah.
Like the goal of the program is to reunite families and bring them to Canada. That is why the immigration system exists for families. That is why these things were legislated. So you would think that it would be something more of an interview to ensure that two people actually loves each other. I find it surprising. What you're saying.
You raise a good point. It's really not. You would think that as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to my story. But I can tell you, there wasn't one question asked at my husband's interview in Kuwait in relation to my relationship with him. So it just goes to show that a lot of these immigration officers are going in already with preconceptions already about your relationship. They're going in with their biases as well about your relationship. And often at times decisions are made actually well before they even enter that interview room.
Well,
I want to dissect that
way. Yeah.
Wow. And I want to dissect that a little bit more. Let's switch to an angle, and let's get to Helen's story so that we can just get, the intros in there. And then we want to talk specifically about the interview process and, just all of the
Yeah, no, for sure.
factors.
I'll be brief with my story. I met my husband when we started speaking in 2014. My name is Helena Ferrer. My husband's name is Omar Saman. He is a resident of Egypt. There he is. He is a resident of Egypt. We started speaking in 2014. I myself am an immigrant to Canada as well. Just by way of background, I'm of Portuguese descent. I came to Canada when I was 3 years old. So I too am an immigrant, and my father sponsored my mom and 3 children to come here back in the 70s. And I can tell you that the process was nothing like it is today, because had it been, I don't know that we would have been here. But so I started speaking to my husband in late 2014. In early 2015, we had decided that we wanted this relation to progress. And we made the decision together that I was going to visit him in Egypt. At the time, my husband Omar actually was working in Kuwait for about 12 years. So between Egypt and Kuwait, he was going back and forth, but he is an Egyptian citizen. So I visited him in April of 2015 in Cairo. We decided that we wanted to be married, and on that trip, we made the initiative, or we made plans to get married. After that, we had some conversations on, like most couples, on, what would make the most sense in terms of where we're going to reside. There were just some discussions about me moving to Kuwait with him, and it was definitely something that I was contemplating. But given my roots to Canada, the fact that I have family and friends here, the fact that I have an 82-year-old mother who I'm the primary caregiver for, it just made more sense for us to start the spousal sponsorship process. So we did that. We initiated that in October of 2015. We did that on our own. We didn't use any assistance, any legal assistance in terms of a paralegal or a lawyer. So in October of 2015, we submitted our application, and I found it a little bizarre that we hadn't received an email or anything from IRCC. So in April of 2016, I made some inquiries with IRCC as to the status of our application, only to find out that, and apparently this happens quite often, so only to find out that they had returned our application in December of 2015 because one of the codes in the application had changed. So nothing actually on the form had changed, it was just the code. But the point to this is we were never told. They never corresponded with us to tell us that the form had expired and that we would have to resubmit our application. So at that point, we had decided to enlist the assistance of a paralegal to make sure that we had a more fulsome application and there were no errors that were going to be made. So we resubmitted our second application. So the first one was not denied, it was just returned. We resubmitted a second application. I believe it was July of 2016 with the assistance of paralegal. At that time, the legislation was a little bit different. At that time, your waiting period was dependent on what country, or the processing time, I should say, of the waiting period was dependent on what country you were from. And at that time, Egypt was 18 months. And I can tell you, it took the full 18 months for IRCC to let us know that an area interview was going to be required. They didn't tell us why, just like in Nadini's situation. They never informed us as to why. They just said an interview is required. So I did not accompany my husband to the interview. At the time, like I said, he was working in Kuwait, so we had to wait quite some time for this area interview. So in 2018, January of 2018, he attended his area interview, or the immigration officer attended the area interview there. And I had touched upon this a little bit before. His interview in total was less than 20 minutes, which I found very bizarre and peculiar, because at that time I had spoken to some people. I had a friend who had gone through the process, and my understanding is that most interviews can take anywhere between an hour and in some cases 2 hours. I can tell you that the immigration officer walked in, and you got to remember too, for a lot of our spouses, they're from underdeveloped countries, they're from third world countries. So imagine what that's like, walking into a room for them where there's already an imbalance of power and privilege. And let's say how it is. The majority of these immigration officers are white males. So for for the principal applicants, our spouses, this is a very intimidating process for them. So he was interviewed, like I said, less than 20 minutes. The first question from the immigration officer was, you just want to come to Canada to obtain status. So imagine how that sets the tone for the remainder of the interview when that's the very first question. And again, not based on anything. We felt like we provided a pretty fulsome application as well. Like Nadini, we submitted text messages, WhatsApp messages, tons of photos, tons to prove the genuineness of our relationship. So we didn't have a good feeling about how the interview went. I can go into more details about what were some of the things that were highlighted from that interview, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But about, I'd say 3 weeks later, we received a letter to say that our application for spousal and permanent residency was denied. It was denied based on two reasons. One was the genuineness, and the second reason was they deemed that he was no longer eligible to be an applicant.
Wow.
At that point, we weren't sure how to proceed, where to go from this. So understandably, we were very upset. Here I am thinking that I'm about to start my life with my husband. He's going to come to Canada. We're going to start a family, and Nadini and I will talk a little bit about that as well.
Wow, Helen. I mean, just listening to that so far, I've said it's emotional, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
It's like how I just can't imagine that. I just can't imagine what that must feel like, because let's get some facts established. The process itself is already stressful. It is already a process that is very stressful. A lot of people, can't describe what they would have felt during those 12 or 18 or 20 months. And then to have your spouse walk into a room, be interrogated, and then be denied.
Yeah, and really not given an opportunity to even be able to give a fulsome answer. So that was something else that happened at the interview as well, amongst, like I said, a lot of judgment and biases being made on the part of the immigration officer, but then to not even be able to explain certain things and have the interview just completed within 20 minutes, it's not a fair process, not at all.
And let me just say, because, you know, I believe in being fair, and I do believe that a process is needed, because obviously there are people out there with ill intent, and I can understand why the government would want to ensure that people are genuine, and that's a good thing, and I support that. But I mean, you guys have said this, Voices for Families, other groups have said that there needs to be a review of the process so that these issues that we're talking about can be solved. 100%. If thousands of people are coming forward and saying that genuine marriages are being failed, right, due to a broken system, and the government, successive governments, actually, administration after administration, have not done anything to resolve that, it will continue to, you know, we will continue to have these issues, and it's not fair to genuine marriages and genuine couples that they must go through this simply because there are issues that, you know, they can't resolve, whether it's fraud or whether it's criminal, you know, coming into Canada. That is the responsibility of the government to rectify. The onus should not be on families. So I you know, it's just depressing. It's just really depressing.
It is, and you know, well, the thing is that the you know, the premise for which they conduct these interviews, really, they think it's the solution for determining fraud. But what they've done now is they've created another huge barrier and problems for themselves as an immigration system, now that these things are coming out into the open, is that you are actually teetering on the points of breaking, an outright breaking elements of the Human Rights Code. You are on the borders of all kinds of practices and techniques that are discriminative. And when I look at what went on with my husband in that interview as well, I kept thinking, but isn't this the type of interrogative tactics that you would use on, let's say, that you see in the movies, like when a terrorist is actually, making motions to do something of national security measures.
And you would also think that if the applicant, sorry, I just want to put this in, but you would also think that if the applicant went through biometrics and security clearances, like you said, and RCMP checks, you would think that this is a part of ensuring that the person does not compromise the safety of Canada.
So why go through this extra measure of trying to determine, security of a person? And when you hear the criteria, because I've done my research now, Akeem, you would be stunned to see what they deem and necessary for an interview and per region. And in my husband's case, he walked into that interview. The person coming out of the room before him was in complete tears, a grown man in tears. And when my husband said, "What happened?" the man said, "Oh my God, it was horrific. I don't even know what happened in there, but I know without a doubt she failed me." And that's all he was able to muster before my husband went into that interview. And I want to present, for those who haven't had an interview, you're in, one of the nicest sort of Canadian buildings. For my husband, he comes from the countryside, so he had to travel, and get there 5 hours later, hungry, thirsty, tired, and now going into the tallest building he's ever seen in the Dominican Republic. And you're not allowed to bring phones, knapsack, nothing. You're going in barehanded, except for the materials of the additional information that you're supposed to give. You walk into a very cold, hostile environment. It's separated by glass. And you're sitting on one chair, and there is one interviewer. Only one person has the ability to make a decision on your life and your path and your journey in 20 minutes, as Helen said, or an hour, as in my case. And in many other cases, in 1 hour, she was able to make that decision. No camera, no voice recording, nothing of that would be accountable to prove and show to other people what really took place in that interview. And as Helen said, this is a complete abuse of authority. There are power imbalances in there. And so the interviewer has the ability to redirect the outcome of this interview in any which way they feel like it. So if they look at you visually and they don't get a sense that they like you, or and in my case, she even made notes. In the notes, she said pretty much, and I'll quote, his body language told me he was nonchalant and he did not care. Meanwhile, my husband was fearful, intimidated, traumatized by what went on. But her view of looking at him visually, and being a guy who comes from a sports background where you have to have the discipline to look seriously at stuff, you're under pressure to make that shot, you start getting very serious. And instead, what he did is, his lack of emotion told her he didn't care, when really there was so much more going on inside. But she actually made these physical characteristics and traits as an observation to deny us. And that's when we teeter on crossing the boundaries of what is acceptable practices, what isn't, what crosses discrimination barriers, human rights code, just ethical responsibilities as an interviewer. And to actually feel free and protected to put that in the notes and feel that there would be no repercussions, because number one, it's their word versus yours. It's only the two of you in an interview. And it's not even like a panel interview to say,
So Nadini and Helen, let me just ask you, because I know this has been a question, and I already see there's similarities, obviously, between both of you and your cases. Your spouses, are they from visa-required countries?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Wow.
Many.
And the reason why I ask that question is because there's this, I don't even know what to call it, if it's a perception or if it's reality, but obviously advocates and family reunification groups have been saying for many months now that there seems to be, a difference between visa required countries and persons from visa exempt countries. Do you share that same sentiment?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And why is that?
When you look at, and Nadini and I have been protesting in front of Marco Mendicino's office, as well as many others who've been present there on a daily basis for well over a month. When we start to speak to one another and start comparing each other's stories, it's interesting to see who is at what stage and what is being asked of them at what stage. And it's interesting when you start speaking to other people, what we're noticing more often than not is that the people that are being asked to attend interviews are from visa required people, like what Nadini said, people from the Latin Americas, people from Africa, the North African countries, like my husband, like Egypt, people from the Middle East. Oftentimes it's when you again start to make some comparisons, it's oftentimes men, oftentimes brown men, oftentimes men of a certain particular religion. In my situation, my husband is of Muslim faith, Islamic faith. When you start to look at all these things, there's it's evident to see that there is certain similarities around who is being asked to attend interviews and also who's actually being denied, what applications being denied. And I've said this before in one of my tweets. I honestly believe that if my husband was a Caucasian male, if he was from England, Germany, or Australia, if he was of Christian faith, I think our circumstances may have been very different. And I say that, it's my opinion, but I say that because I honestly believe that.
I feel that our immigration system, as it pertains to outland sponsorships from visa required countries, have to go through more extenuating processes, more rigorous processes than everyone else. And this is from not only us now as a network and having advocacy groups talk to us and surveys being done where it's completely evident that this is taking place. But you look at what is even being said from the horse's mouth itself, and this is like area directors, and I've got the evidence here from their 2016 meeting at the Canadian Immigration Committee with our politicians, saying this from their own mouth. And and they do have evaluations of specific regions, specific geographies, and they do end up using that against us as a criteria for determining genuineness. And if I can describe, this is exactly what, and I'm going to call names. This is what the area director at the time in 2016, his name was Olivier Jacques, said at that meeting. And this is pertaining to the Latin Americas. And I'm sure for Helen's region as well, I had seen other stuff, but I concentrated on what was said for El Salvador, Cuba, Dominican Republic, those regions. And it says here, in both Dominican Republic, this is what he's saying, and Cuba, we have also observed what can be called as holiday romance types of relationships, where Canadian citizens, male or female, develop a relationship with a local resident during a 1 to 2 week period. Well, no, that's completely, even when you look at just that being written there, when you look at these regions, the majority of their economics come from tourism. So meaning that the majority of their people are going to be working in tourism. How else are you going to meet and marry and have a romance with anyone, with someone in another country, and not have that be a sort of a basis for a meeting point, when most of these countries, their basis for economy is tourism, and you are a tourist coming in and you happen to fall in love. Is that a reason why you should interview me because you think that I just met a local on a trip to Dominican? I didn't even fit this description. I've been to the Dominican many times and didn't meet my husband before. He was not working on a resort. I was not on a resort. I did not just start my romance in 2 weeks. We talked on the phone every day without fail, nights on end for hours on end. That's how our romance developed. But from this paper and from these words, it's callous determinations, and it's coming from a very subjective, biased, limited perspective. And if I can say this too, because it goes on, there's significant age gaps ranging from 10 to 50 years, typically with an older Canadian sponsor and a younger applicant, and that's where they have to determine the intent. So now you're judging relationships on age, and you put this in writing, you actually say this publicly, that we're going to judge you on age, right? And if we had to look at what our own human rights code says, and it goes on, because I'll move to other elements, but freedom from discrimination. Okay, every person has a right to equal treatment with respect to services, goods, facilities, without discrimination because of race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, marital status, family status, or disability. So here we have our own directors, area directors, representing our government, publicly stating that, there's often a gap in age, and that warrants us to evaluate or understand what the intent is on these cases. And they move on to talk about, we look at age differences, lack of familiarity with one spouse, inconsistencies with narratives, and cultural linguistic differences.
Wow.
Okay, this is
you did your homework.
I have a lot more, trust me, because I don't want to come on here to talk and people think, oh, look at them, the bunch of women that are just complaining. And sorry for your heartache.
You want to bring on facts so that people know that you're not dreaming this stuff. This is reality.
Right.
But I want to ask you, when you made an interesting point about visa offices earlier, you made this point about visa offices and then there being discrimination based on region. And obviously when it comes to age and, all these different factors, but let me ask you a question, because I like to challenge points so that, we reach a point where we find clarity. Do you believe that the current policies that are in place with regards to, region and age and gender and all of these different policies that we see being rolled out, do you believe it's necessary to protect Canada though?
No. I don't believe so, and I'll tell you why again. And Helen, please, sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
Jump in whenever, but
yeah,
here you are setting policy, and I have a policy background. This is why this is so important for me, is that you are setting policy based on a minority to impact a majority. And so when I say this, I'm talking about the fact that when we do our statistics, and this is real statistics of the family sponsorship process, you're looking at out of 70,000 people who came in let's say 2019, 1,700 may have complained that their marriage didn't work out and that, it was either fraudulent or whatever it is, have you. We still haven't even a determination that those 1,700, is it because they came here and they didn't like Canada or things broke down within the marriage for other reasons, but that the intent was genuine? We still haven't that. So when we look at that, even on an overall basis, you're looking at 2% or under 2%. 2% of these people that are coming from visa-required countries that you are now forming policy basis premises and foundations to put us through rigorous processes, elongated processes that extend our right to family reunification, keeping us distant and causing a whole slew of other problems that we could get into later. But you're also now putting us through strenuous interviews for what?
But when it comes to
1% of the population that do err.
When it comes to issues like you mentioned age, right? So let's say I know obviously we've heard that there've been scenarios where obviously people that come from marriages of convenience, let's say there's a person that's 50 years old and then they married a person that's 20 years old. Obviously from a government standpoint that would create some red flags. So how do you reconcile what you're calling for with what is reality in terms of the possibilities they're trying to prevent?
Reality is, if that was a couple here in Canada and they didn't have to go through a process, they wouldn't have to account to the government for that. Reality is they've already sought permission from their families and had their families be witness to this. They already went through a very formal process with a pastor or somebody legitimate in charge. They have proof of documents for all of this already on file. So if they've got all of these checks and balances, why would you not accept it? Why does Canada feel the need to insert itself in such a paternalistic fashion so as to save the usually female citizen from the predatory visa-required country applicant?
So I'm going to ask both of you guys. So then, do you believe that the interview process should just be dropped? Do you believe that that's necessary, 100%. Or should it just be completely excluded?
You see, I think that there are areas where it would be necessary, but it would be necessary where, let's say, something like the criminal background check came up with errors or certain things that highlighted flags, like that the person probably had military activities or ties to specific groups that are known to be organizations that infiltrate or cause reasons for national security. But when you're looking at like somebody who is just in another country who happen to find love, no matter how bizarre it seems to you, no matter how where the differences are that a 50-year-old can connect with a 20-year-old, that's now getting into subjective areas, and that is not room for anyone to make that type of judgment. That's between that couple and their God. You know what I mean? And so to now put that as a premise of policy to sort of protect us, we have the right, and this is a legal fact, you have the right to self-govern. Now, if you've made decisions that are bad for yourself and you go in and you, just like real estate, you go into another country and you buy a property that happens to downturn in the market, you lose money and you didn't do a very good decision, do you think that the government needs to play a role in helping save your finances from your own personal decision to have gone to another country and invested in property? Right. It's kind of the same thinking.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make, and I know you and Helen, obviously you've spoke about proposing solutions, in the immediate and long term to make the process more faster, transparent, accountable, and a fair process. What would that solution look like from your perspective, or maybe from a group's perspective?
Well, I can tell you that with the Voices for Families, one of the things that the initiative is to have the interviews exempt, as well as once you reach a certain stage in the process, and for many of us, we're well past that 12-month mark, we believe and we're asking that immigration officers just exempt us altogether. We've waited long enough, and really what this government is saying to us is it's not that we don't trust you, the sponsor, we don't trust the applicant. So the onus is on the applicant to prove that, yes, this is a genuine relationship. And what we're saying is, no, we provide you in many cases, and in my case, with our, I guess you can say, third application that we submitted, over 300 pages of documentation. That in itself should be sufficient enough to prove the genuineness of the relationship. Yes, there are certain circumstances, like Nadini said, where perhaps an interview may be required. But what we're finding as well with a lot of these interviews and these immigration officers is that they lack cultural competence. Nadini spoke a lot about the Latin American countries, but I'll speak to the Middle Eastern countries, the North African countries, some of the Arab countries, because that's what I'm most familiar with. And one of the things that was documented in that form that Nadini was reading to you was plural or polygamous marriages. So they're going into these interviews already with the assumption that perhaps somebody may already still be married, or that there's these arranged marriages, or that the marriages are being forced. And these are biases and assumptions that we believe that are genuinely being made. And we're saying, no, like we've provided you with sufficient information. There's no need for an additional interview. In my case, like I was saying when I was telling my story, we were denied, and now we're being asked again for a second interview. When the third time around, when I asked my lawyer why it is that we're having an interview, her response is, the reality is, once you've been denied once, you're going to go through a second interview again. So we've provided everything already to immigration. I don't understand. We can eliminate the interview process. Simply, we can eliminate the backlog. If immigration officers have concerns yet again, why are we being forced to go through a second interview? Why are they not emailing us and saying, here are my concerns, this is what I need clarity about? And I'm sure the majority of us would be able to provide that information to them. But yet we're being subjugated to have to go through yet again another interview. And honestly, I'll give my opinion. I honestly believe that this is yet another form for them to be able to yet again deny you again based on.
Let me ask you a question. Do you believe that when Voices of the Families, co-founders and founder Jennifer and Vishal was on last week, we talked about whether there's inefficiencies that's causing or contributing to these issues. Do you believe that it's more a matter of control, or is it just inefficiencies that the government has failed to correct why we're seeing some of these discriminatory policies, some of these practices that are destroying genuine marriages? Do you believe that it's a matter of control or inefficiencies? What's your take on that?
From me, my perspective, I think a lot of it has to do with inefficiencies. And I'll tell you why I say that. I mean, number one, just based on the fact that I with some further research, I had understood that as part of the process, if an officer looking at your application had specific red flags that they thought, okay, there's age differences. Oh, it looks like her family wasn't, at the union. Oh, it's shorter term cohabitation period, which was what they had put as my red flags, which I only found out months later because they don't make that transparent to you to even equip yourself with enough to respond to what they're concerned about. I think that in these cases, they could have written a letter to me and said, hey, we're concerned about this, this, and this. Give us this evidence, explain your story in a little bit more detail, and then we can take it from there. And based on what you've said, then if it still warrants an interview, we will, we'll have an interview if there is still major stuff outstanding. But they don't do that. They skip this part of the process, or they don't make this as part of a fair process. And instead, you're now in an interview queue, backlogged by only a limited number of persons who are interviewing all around the world. And so you're now part of a process of a wait and see. And we've now...
Wow.
Yeah, now we're seeing folks that are, in interviews waiting and they're saying that they're going to conduct virtual interviews, but they've been in queue for over a year just to have one of these interviews that could possibly be routed to a denial, right? And on top of that, and that's the dangerous part of it, but on top of that, there's people who have already been through the interviews, many, and they're sitting waiting on a decision. Why is it taking so long if you've already given them everything you've done, and now you're still in queue waiting on a decision on your life? Right. And they've been waiting close to 12 months. Right.
And that's the like the dreading part, because obviously, and we want to talk about this. There's a pandemic, right? There's a pandemic, and you know, groups have been saying that the process has been frustrating and long even before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just exaggerated the issue. Yeah. So obviously, one of the most painful factors of what's happening right now is the wait period. Because there's so much tied into it, and then having to wait 12 months, having to do an interview or maybe 2 interviews, and then silence.
Right.
Do you believe that the STRV initiative that many groups have spoken about? We know that Jennifer was involved with the rollout of that program, and the former group SS, well, actually the current group, Spousal Sponsorship Advocates and Voices of the Families. Do you believe that that initiative would have alleviated some of the stress that we're seeing today?
100%. Absolutely. It would have alleviated the stress. It would have meant that we would have been with our spouses now while still going through the process. And we'll talk about this as well in terms of the impact. The impact goes a lot further than emotional impact. It's emotional, it's physical, it's financial. We're seeing more and more people suffer from anxiety and depression as a result of this wait time. And when we talk about COVID, we're not saying that we're oblivious to the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. Absolutely, we know that. But what we're saying is that these delays in the processing were happening well before COVID. And I'm a perfect example of this, because in January of 2019, and I have the letter here, clearly states, and this is before the pandemic, this is before this is before the lockdown started, we received a letter 12 months into the process saying that another interview was going to be required. Not within a timely fashion, but the letter clearly states that we're required for an interview, that we're in queue for an interview, and that the interview would take place in another 6 to 12 months. So at the 12-month mark, we're now being told that we have to wait yet again another 6 to 12 months. And this letter was dated January 27, 2020. And not only are we required, and our application now is currently sitting in the London visa office, which we know is an extremely slow office with extremely limited staff. And that's what we've been told. That's what I've been told through my MP's office, who's been obtaining updates for me. But not only that, it's almost like they set you up for failure. And the reason I say that is because in the letter, it indicates, and this was in January, again, January 27, that if we wanted an earlier interview, that we could apply for a visa to the UK, in which case we automatically, we started that initiative. We did that quite quickly. My husband had to go get on a train from the city that he's from, 9 hours, go to Cairo, file an application for a UK visa, only to find out 3 days later that it was denied. And they know very well, for people who are from visa required countries, that obtaining these visas are not easy. So it's like I said, it's like they're setting you up for failure. And the only other option now for us is that he attend an interview in either Islamabad or Abu Dhabi. My question,
What's your question? I want to hear.
I was going to say my question to my lawyer was, thankfully and hopefully, like most people will be in a financial position to be able to do that. But I asked my lawyer, what if we were not in a financial position to have to travel now to these countries? Because you're talking about flights, you're talking about hotel costs, you're talking about costs that you're going to incur while you're in these countries. I said, so what happens if we were to say, you know what? We're not able to attend an interview. So
what they're saying is that it creates a level of hardship that it's very unbearable, that is very hard for someone sitting behind an IRCC desk to determine, but they have to put themselves in our shoes. They have to see that what they're doing and the actions that they're taking and the policies that they're implementing is not in line with family reunification.
Because
It's
they're public
against it.
officials, right? Like, I mean, they work for you. They have to. They have no choice, right?
But it hasn't been working. So you have a TRV that seems to work for other streams of immigration. It seems to work for other people that don't require visas. But the ones who are from visa required countries, we are not, there is a clause called dual intent, and
That's right.
we are not allowed under dual intent, meaning that you can have a permanent resident application and still apply for a tourist
And
visa
that's the thing
so that you can finish.
That's I'm very confused with that, and I've spoken to many people about this, but obviously dual intent exists, and then we have Article 179B that prohibits the entry of persons seeking permanent residency but trying to visit their spouse at the same time. I mean,
it's not upheld, and the majority, and I'm talking about like 90-something% of us from who are trying to bring our spouses over to visit us while we await a PR process or whatever have you. And even though we've already passed the sponsorship and you're responsible for him and they've already passed biometrics and medicals, I mean, you already have us in your system as cleared. We're not allowed to bring our spouses over because dual intent does not act the same way for visa required countries. 90-something% of us are denied under Section 179B. And that's why spousal sponsorship advocates and Jenny Kwan, the NDP critic in immigration, was trying to put through that special petition for the special TRV to allow, especially in a pandemic, some kind of leeway like the super visa for grandparents to allow spouses to do that. But again, we're going back to this premise of the policies of IRCC when it comes to outland spousal sponsorship and visa required countries is a premise of distrust.
But I'm looking at, obviously, I'm looking at the dual intent factor, and then also the 179B and the criteria. And I'm just thinking to myself, make it make sense, because it doesn't make sense. You give a person the ability to visit their spouse, and you say that that's a criteria that can be met under dual intent. Yet when they reach the border or the CBSA, they're denied based on 197B, is it what it's called?
179B.
179B.
Where it says, and I'll explain what it says. When we get the write-up for the denial of the TRV, it says, oh, well, it seems like you have familial ties in Canada. And so for that reason, you may not wish to return to your country. So
but obviously you're not wishing to return to your country in the long term because you're an applicant. Obviously, that's obvious.
Exactly. But they're saying for those that get denied, which is what their intentions are. Like, that's how I see it. It's like the majority of denials are coming out of this interview process. That's why it was so important to talk about this interview process. They're saying that you may not want to return back to your country. So in other words, you're saying that our spouses are going to come here, spouses with clean criminal records, have gone through all of these security checks, medical checks, everything else, but they're going to come to Canada, break the law. And while they're breaking the law, because they're illegal, they can't get medical, they can't work, they can't do all this stuff. So they put themselves in further hardship in order to remain illegally in this country.
There's a removal process. The CBSA, they do exist.
Absolutely, there is a removal process. It's part of their immigration act. They can do that. They can detain and deport.
Again, it's a distrust. They're basically essentially saying, we don't believe that your spouses are going to leave. Therefore, we're going to deny you. Why would we put our applications at risk at that point when we've gone so far already? So to imply and suggest that our spouses is not going to leave is such a distrust to us.
And let's pull you back to that 1%. Let's talk about those numbers again. You're talking about a policy that impacts how many thousands of individuals, their mental health, their family life, their ability to have children, fertility issues, which is what me and Helena and many other women have to go through, and mostly women that are impacted, women citizens impacted in this process. And you do this for 1% of the population that may fraud Canada, for which we have a criminal system involved for that, for which we have a deportation system involved for that. Perhaps we have to start looking at this from a standpoint of where's this distrust coming in, and it all goes back to.
And I must say that obviously when it comes to the advocacy groups, there have been much attention and detail put into creating these proposals, like the STRV.
Yeah.
And they don't shy away from national security. They provide a
Right.
plan to ensure that the integrity of the immigration system is upheld. I mean, you would think that the immigration committee, the minister himself would have said, like, there are professionals in this group. We should consult with them to provide a plan if it is that difficult to provide a plan. If COVID is that difficult to the point where the ministry, they don't know, or the government don't know what avenue to take or what is the best option, you would think that they would have come to the table with these advocacy groups and said, look, let's look at your plan and let's see if this is an option that we can implement to ensure that families stay reunited, to ensure that Canadians who have the right, that are protected under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and under the Constitution, can be with their spouses who they legally married. You would think that that would be an option, but we have not seen that.
You raise a really good point, Akeem, and the point is that they have given us no options. We are the lowest on their poll of priorities for all immigration streams. I have seen announcements come out where they've just given the Hong Kong students permanent residence. They've just
skilled refugees
stream, you know, and they look at our spouses as if they would not, like, what's the risk to Canada? They come in here and they're ready and willing to work. And
there is no risk.
Our house spouses are coming in with, you're thinking that they're not educated, but like, we've got groups of people. One woman, her husband is a doctor in Cuba, willing to come and fight COVID, and she's not allowed. Her application hasn't even been acknowledged, far less. My husband, his occupation actually fits the National Occupation Code, the NOC code, that is highly desirable on their list of skill sets that they desire for Canada, both for the 2019 and 2020 roster. Yet still you denied my husband based on minor principles in an interview on linguistics. You didn't even interview me. Like, you didn't even have, give fair process in any of this, and denied a potentially good person who could have fit into all of the point systems that you clarify for your economic class citizens. Absolutely. So again, it's this belief that the spouses are coming in uneducated, don't have the linguistics, don't want to work, want to be criminals, like, and it's not true. They're coming in with skill sets. They've passed the criminalities. If they didn't have the linguistics, you bet your bottom dollar they're learning it there. And when they come here, it's going to be warp speed that they're learning. And in the meantime, while they are going to apply their skill sets, what are they going to do? They're going to be investing in, number one, education. That's money into your system, just like your visa students. Number two, they will be filling up all of those labor types of positions and general positions that none of your Canadians want to do, while they work their way up to the skill sets and the economic, areas that they truly want to do. And again, just to pinpoint back to statistics as I go back to this, IRCC on their actual website have a report of how well family sponsorship spousal immigrants fare in comparison to their economic class immigrants. And would you believe that on that report, it showed that spousal sponsorships applicants coming in surpass and fare better employment-wise than the economic class immigrants.
And we said that on our last segment. I mean, we were talking about this exact same thing. And one of the points that we made is that obviously families will be here for the long term, right? They will be here to build, to invest, to have children. And it's not to say that bringing in students for economic reasons, bringing in, temporary foreign workers is not a good thing. But you would think that families would be priority because those are the people that are coming for the long term. If anyone's going to build the economy, it's going to be the family class immigrants. So you would think it would make sense for the Liberals to say, yeah, we should prioritize family sponsorship because those are the people that are going to build the economy faster than anyone else.
Right. They say it though, Akeem, their actions don't meet their words.
Right.
So everywhere it's such a beautiful line. Reunify families. We are here. We're going to make family reunification part of our entire immigration platform, and yet still here we are. And here's the difficulties that we're going through. When you hear from an area director that says, we're going to interview over 50% of the people who are applying from specific regions, right? And in reality, it's not 50, it's 90%. I have every 9 persons that I meet from Dominican Republic, only every 10 persons, only 1 person is not interviewed. 90%, over 90% are.
But obviously, in the first term of this administration, we saw the former minister, Ahmad Hussein, made some good efforts to improve the family sponsorship process. And the process was reduced from 24 months to 12 months.
To 12.
And we saw that obviously part of their campaign was ensuring that Canadians and spouses would be able to reunite and have an easier and faster and more transparent process. In the second term, when the Honorable Minister Marco Mendicino was elected and obviously given the post to run or to oversee immigration, why was there, I was wondering, why was there a switch in terms of direction? There seems to be no compassion or care for family tax immigrants, only economic immigrants. Wouldn't the mandate remain the same?
On air, he doesn't, I don't even see compassion in his face. And I don't mean to say that openly, but it really, you're looking for any kind of olive leaf to hang on. And every time it's disappointing. It was disappointing that Jenny Kwan put forward such an amazing proposal to get us in a super visa for grandparents through the special TRV, and it fell on deaf ears, so much so that we have to now send in a second petition. And meanwhile, the parting line is constantly, but family reunification is important. Well, if it's so important, why aren't you doing anything, especially in the areas of family reunification that are most impacted, which are outland spousal sponsorships from visa-required countries? We've got nothing. Every other stream got something. We got a big fat zero.
Right.
And
even with Paul Dancho, the honorable member for Parliament, the honorable member of Parliament, Raquel Dancho, even posed a question to him in the latest meeting saying, will you commit to giving Canadians a great Christmas? Will you commit to doing this? And will you commit to doing that? And he just continued to circumvent the question. And she kept pushing the question to say, this is the issue. And there was not a definitive answer. And I was just
there never is. There never is.
Helena, did you apply for a TRV recently?
My last TRV was in June of 2019. It was denied September 2019. I have not applied yet. And I'll be honest with you, I don't believe it's going to be successful if I do apply. You put so much effort into putting these applications together. What we've been seeing also is, since the announcement was made by Marco Mendicino back in September around the dual intent, a lot of people were under the impression that more people were going to be granted TRVs, but that's not what we're actually seeing. A lot of members in these advocacy groups are receiving responses from embassies saying visa denied. So there's an inconsistency here on what the minister is actually saying and what's actually happening. He also mentioned virtual interviews being implemented back in September. This was something that he said in his announcement. We are now in December. Not one person that we know of in either group has received or has gone through a virtual interview. So what does that?
Don't forget that there were two exemptions also released that was supposed to make this more efficient. Right. Families were supposed to be reunited. That was the purpose of the exemption for immediate family members. But again, groups are reporting that families are still being denied. So my question obviously is, if that is the case, I'm sure if we recognize that, the minister does, because he's the person that has the statistics, the agency, the resources to know what's going on. But we haven't seen any amendments to say, okay, yes, we messed up. The CBSA is not cooperating. Here are the changes that we're going to make to ensure now, this second time, that families are reunited. We haven't seen that.
We have not.
No, and the announcement that it would be 49,000 folks that will be reunited by the end of the year. I haven't seen any of those statistics. They said it would be 6,000 a month. Pretty much anyone that I know we're still fighting the good fight here. So it hasn't absolutely applied to us, and it certainly hasn't applied or directly impacted on a large scale the people who needed it the most, the people who need the family reunification the most, and that is people who are separated, and that is outland spousal sponsorships from visa required countries.
Wow.
So that's where we're going. And I wanted to comment on that TRV as well. I mean, we applied for 2 TRVs and were turned down again under section 175. Yeah, of course.
Not one, 2. You applied
twice, and we did it in 2019 and 2020. We got denied under 179B, but this 2021 they added a little extra, dressing to the blow, or a nice little piece of icing, saying since you've already been denied for a PRV, we can't approve a TRV. So already they've kind of denied me unfairly through a PRV process, for which we still haven't gone into some of the details of what went on into those interviews so that people are aware. But you get denied, and then that also catapults into your irrevocation of a TRV now, right? So given the condition, I still applied again in October, and this time it was under special circumstances where I had to get doctor's notes and my MP to support that. While you were denying us for genuineness in an interview on March 3rd, this couple suffered 2 miscarriages, not one, but 2 miscarriages in 2019 that we were overcoming. And I have to talk about these things openly because they have to understand how it impacts the female, and most of it is under the gender of female that are being denied and impacted here.
Right.
So let's be fair.
All of this I did not even realize, and this is why I love talking with people, bringing on the professionals that know more about immigration, like yourselves and the advocacy groups, because all of this get left out. All of this information gets left out, even when we get coverage from the news, right? You never just tell your story and then that's it. But this information is what a lot of Canadians don't know. The reality that we face as family class immigrants is something that is not made known. So every time there's an interview, it's like, oh, well, they're fighting to reunite with their spouses, but they don't understand the difficulties.
The ramifications are real. The ramifications and the impacts of this is real. And while you were in the process of determining we were not genuine, we were in the process of grieving the losses of 2 children. And we were in the process of trying to grow our family, and now being turned down a TRV because he needs to come here to complete the fertility treatment. We had been seeing a fertility specialist since early March 2019, right? And got denied in March of 2020. But again, and this will really shock you. There's a lot of families or people rearing children outside of like in Canada by themselves, while their husbands
there's also babies being born on FaceTime.
Yes,
what about
absolutely.
that?
And this is a regular trend, Akeem. This is a regular trend because the fact is that they're not deeming that a child is something that could warrant your understanding of what's genuine. And I want to quote something. This is from the Appeal Tribunal judge for IRCC. Her name is Judge Marion M. Sammy, because I am going to call names. A couple may have a sexual relationship. This is what she said as a finding. A couple may have a sexual relationship without that relationship being genuine. Neither are the existence of a child or the attempts to have a child determinative of genuineness. So let me tell you what, are we having babies by ourselves? And is Canada really saying to us that you would rather a child grow up in a single parent household, and that in itself has its own weight on the health and social welfare system of Canada, than permit the father to come and have a meaningful relationship with his own child in Canada, because having a child or the attempts to have a child is not a determination of genuineness?
And
what is then? What is, if that's the case, right?
Just the effects of children having to, because for adults, it's a little bit more easier to understand. But for kids, how do you tell your kid, like, mommy or daddy is not, we don't know when they're coming home, right? Like there was I forget the name of the person on Twitter from, I believe, SSA, that had their child hold up a sign that says, I talked to my dad through a cell phone.
We know who she is.
And I'm like,
how sad is that?
And the reality, right, Helen? Like to go to some of these regions, how much does it cost you in a plane ticket just to get there? And we're talking about women who are having to now leave their jobs, take time off, even lose their jobs in the process of trying to unite their family on their own.
Yeah,
How much?
I can tell you on average, I've seen my husband 10 times in 5.5 years. 5.5 years we've been married and we're still being questioned around the genuineness of our relationship. But on each trip, I would say I probably, between my husband and I, we spend a minimum of $5,000. In total, we're probably anywhere between, I'd say, $60,000 to $70,000 now that we've spent, because we're not talking about just flights and accommodations. And some may say, well, why are you paying for accommodations? When I went to Kuwait, which is one of the most expensive countries, my husband was living with roommates, so we're having to stay in places, and these are costly places. So we're talking about like ridiculous amounts of money between all of us that we're spending when we can be using that money to reinvest in the economy back in Canada. Our spouses are not risks to this country. They could be here contributing to the economy, contributing to opening a business, but instead we're spending all our money on these trips going back and forth. We're flying halfway for some of us across the world. We're talking about flights that take an entire day to get there. And just going back to the fertility piece, I too, for many years, have been trying to grow my family with my husband. I got married at the age of 41. We're not a young couple. I waited that long because I wanted to make sure that the person I'm going to be with is the person that I felt a strong connection with, and that's what happened. But yet we're still being questioned on to the genuineness of our relationship. So over the years we've tried, and what IRCC doesn't understand is when you're flying that far, the impacts that it has on a woman's body in relation to her cycle, ovulation, time differences, jet lag. I've been to 2 fertility clinics where the doctors say you have to go a minimum of 3 months before your body becomes accustomed to the time zone as well as other things. So to expect, pardon?
And also risk when it comes to flying, because there is COVID.
Absolutely.
You think that
the stress of this process, and the weight of not having your partner, the love of your life, your right hand by your side to support you emotionally, mentally, physically. These are the reasons why we believed we miscarried. And, we've tried now for a 3rd TRV, and you know what we've been told? Even though this time I have to admit my MP Judy Stroke came all out, and she's trying to support in every which way, and kudos to her and her team. But still, it was met with everything in Mexico is halted because you are not considered an essential worker, despite the fact that your husband has a medical appointment, 2 medical notes, support from your MP. Your application is on hold. Your best bet is to go get a PRV. And here we are back in the repeated cycle of
just
going
stress,
nowhere.
Stress, mental health.
A rat running on a treadmill, and you're going nowhere.
And let's talk about mental health and COVID for a second, because COVID in itself is such a huge, has such a huge impact on many of us. In terms of like the way we work now from home and in all aspects of our life. And I'll share this. I contracted COVID, and I didn't have my partner here with me to support me through that. I was extremely ill. I was hospitalized. And at a time that I need my partner most is when he can't be here with me. I had no one to care for me. And imagine what the impact that has on the spouse who's overseas when they're not able to communicate with their partner, when they're not even able to know how they're doing. He had to call family members because I wasn't answering the phone. I was that ill. So imagine, it's not just the impact on us. What we're finding as well is that our partners now are also suffering from anxiety and depression. My husband left Kuwait in November of 2019 because in February of 2020, we were convinced after 12 months, according to the service standards and IRCC's website, that we were going to have an interview, and that didn't happen. So he can no longer go back to Kuwait. His visa there has been expired. The country is on a lockdown, so he is now living in a country unemployed, having depleted the majority of his savings. So when we talk about impact, it's not just the impact on us, it's the impact on that this process has on our spouses as well. You live in we constantly live on a daily basis in a life of uncertainty. There's not a day that I don't wake up where I don't check my email and wonder, is this the day that I'm going to hear something? We have received little to no updates from our IRCC, and the constant updates that we're receiving is the generic one that due to COVID, they're not in a position to provide us with information.
And I like that so much, I want to just highlight for you something as well. There was a survey that was taken about the mental health snapshot, and they interviewed just randomly 600 of us that belong to around 600 of us that belong to the spousal advocacy groups, and who've been separated from family for months and even years at a time. And here's what they've reported. 18% have suicidal thoughts. 22% have stopped working. And when you stop working too, you're affecting your spousal sponsorship, the sponsorship aspect of it, right?
That's
when you
right.
have to leave and take time to go away as well, or possibly lose or implicate your job, you're also screwing with your own process. So let's be clear on that. 70% have anxiety and 44% have generalized anxiety. 35% have been having panic attacks. And what the video you played of me on that airplane was me.
I want to play that video again in a second.
Yeah, prior to having a bit of what I thought was a panic attack coming on.
And you said it in your video, and the reason why I want to play that video is because I think it just describes everything that we're talking about now. And Helen mentioned it, the uncertainty. And you said it in your video. You said, it's like the feeling of the inevitable, right? What if something bad happens? And you talked about, Helen, you contracting COVID, not having your spouse there with you. That must have been a really stressful time because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to end up in a hospital, intensive care unit, if you're going to need support. There's just so much to consider. And then the thought, actually contracting COVID or any illnesses, and then the thought of it, of not having your spouse, makes the problem worse.
Yes.
I mean, when Canadians watched your video, they were like, wow. I was like, wow. I just couldn't believe it. That put things into perspective for me. And actually, we're going to go and play that video right now. We're going to switch to that video. We got to play that video. I mean, Nadini, you really echoed the sentiments of what a lot of Canadians are saying. So let's take a look at that video.
This time, it was really hard to say goodbye because we don't know when we're going to see each other again. This time, it was really hard to say goodbye because we don't know when we're going to see each other again. This time it feels really different because there's a sense of like hopelessness that's creeping in. We used to always have hope, and there's just now a sense of dread and a sense of the inevitable of something so terrible that could happen. Imagine dying and he can't even be by my side to bury me, or vice versa. It's this inner feeling and I think I must be having panic attacks or something. But somebody has the right to interfere in your marriage and separate you, even though you've legally given them everything you could. Somebody has the right to delay your life. To hurt your life like this. And I can't hold it in anymore because I'm tired of being strong. I don't know how much I have left in me.
Wow.
So impactful. It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch.
It's so hard.
I'm even crying. I mean, it's like, how long? Like, how much more do I have left in me? And that's what a lot of people are thinking. How much more?
Yeah. We're seeing couples that are married for 8 years. We're seeing, over 5 years, 3 years, and we're still having to prove to this government that we're genuine couples. It's like, at what point do we say enough is enough? No one is going to invest all this time, all this money, all this energy, all this effort if they were not genuine couples. And the fact that they even question that is such an insult to us as Canadian citizens. It's like I said before, they're essentially saying, it's not that we don't trust you, we don't trust your partner. So what you're really saying is, you don't trust in my decision making of who I chose to marry. That's really what you're saying.
We really just have to get out of this paternalistic view or premise of making our policies. We have to get out of trying to fit like a square in a round hole, a square peg in a round hole, because you're trying to protect the 1%er, but 99%. You're hurting the lives of these people, and that on any level is not a good basis to form the policies that you're doing. And then you're not training your officers very well for when they have to detect red flags, and even your red flags as a basis of what your area directors are highlighting are discriminative against the regions, against specific populations, specific religions, specific cultures, specific linguistic regions. Everything smells of stuff that you can only hear in movies, and you think, is this really happening in Canada? Because we have such a beautiful humanitarian outlook to the rest of the world. You think if it's anywhere that I'd like to be is that country, but then you're reminded, and I want to remind people, Canada has its share of a very discriminative past and a very racist past. I mean, just recently in the last 2 years, we've got class action lawsuit settlements from Indigenous populations, the First Peoples of Canada, for the 60 Scoop settlement and the residential day school settlement. And we have to remember, the last residential school was only closed 20 years ago. And this was interference of the government in the family lives of people, scooping up children of Indigenous families and putting them with other families that they feel would, according to the Indian Act, beat the Indian out of them. I might be misquoting there, but there is something that is written in that. And you think, well, Canada doesn't, but Canada has a long history of interfering in the lives and the familial lives of people. So, when I look at how they interfere in marriages of people from other countries and taking on this paternalistic view, and hurting especially a more female content of the citizenry of this country, you sit and you think, when is there going to be time for change? You have to look at this differently, and we have to do better. We have to do better. Our governments have to do better. Our governments have to listen to us. We're not uneducated people coming up here talking about this. Where you're having a myth and a misperception of the population that are actually sponsoring, and of the applicants that are coming in, and these misperceptions need to be done away with, because they're untrue, and there's no major policy premise for it. This reason for distrust has to be turned into what Canada sees, what people see of Canada from the rest of the world, which is a country of compassion. Where is the compassion?
Yeah, we're talking about legislation that's Eurocentric and very westernized as well. So we need to take that into consideration. If a principal applicant walks into an interview and they don't make eye contact with you, it's not necessarily because they don't want to look at you, or they don't want to look at you because they don't want you to think they're lying. It could be that culturally, looking at somebody directly in the eye could be a form of disrespect in their culture. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration during the interview.
Helen, looking at your your video and just thinking about some of the things that you said, it's true. I mean, this is the result. People having to go to a constituency office in the cold with children and protest.
Yeah,
that's the result of this. So obviously it's not working. And like you said, there could be cultural differences. There could be things that they don't understand, because obviously immigration officers, well, I mean, maybe there might be an unprecedented few, but there's immigration officers are not by career doctors. They're not professionals in mental health to be able to definitively say, yes, I know that person is not looking in my eyes because he must be like a fraud.
Right.
They're not,
or they're not wearing a wedding ring, because the reality is, in many cultures, in many religions, wearing a wedding ring, again, is a westernized practice. It's a formality that happens in a ceremony in the Western world, or perhaps in the European world. In the Islamic faith, I can tell you right now, there isn't an exchange of wedding rings during the ceremony. But yet, at my husband's interview, the immigration officer noted that he didn't have one on, and it was documented in our notes. He had it on him, and he explained to the immigration officer that it's not something that he wears. But why is that even being noted? Why
there's
is
people
that
in North
even
America
being
that don't wear wedding rings. I mean, there's just people that as they grow older, they just stop wearing their wedding rings. That's just their choice, right?
I
I mean,
tried
wear
to
mine, but it's
investigate
their choice.
the training of these officers that conduct these interviews, and they said, the area directors had said, how we keep up to date is we have roundtable discussions, and we,
with who? With yourself?
Exactly.
Themselves, they have roundtable discussions, right? So really and truly, what the sense that I got is, these people are not sensitive culturally. They're not getting experiential knowledge. They're relying on the visa offices for sort of these expertise. But then you're relying on a worker that's paid how very little to make determinations on the lives and livelihoods of people. And giving their own subjective views as well, because you might get somebody who's working in a visa office who's local, but that person might be, Sunni Muslim versus another type of Muslim, and have an inherent bias against the other type.
And because it's a lot by the discretion as well. I mean, if the person's
absolutely,
I had a bad day at home, I could just come out and take it out on all of the applicants that I have to approve or deny that day. And
well, that's how it felt. That's how it felt. I mean, in our interview process, I want you to know, she didn't allow him. She first started the interview in English. Would you believe that, when we asked for a Spanish translator? Wow. She asked the first series of questions in English. And when he couldn't respond in English to her, even though he's taking English classes, she used that as a basis to deny us, saying that linguistically he doesn't meet it. Nadini's first language is English and his is Spanish. She never asked that Trinidad and Tobago is right next to Venezuela, and that we had to learn English, French, and Spanish from a very early age. She doesn't know that I have a bachelor's degree in political science and in French, and a master's degree as well. And I've had to work in specific languages. She didn't even call me. I sat on the phone waiting for a phone call. I wasn't even called or given any type of ability to explain ourselves at all. She went into text messages that you think you provide 1,000 pages, but and the 1,000 pages will show you or demonstrate there is consistency in this relationship to prove genuineness. Instead, she went into the details of those conversations without context and picked apart certain things, and then started to accuse him of stuff without giving him the due diligence to even understand what conversation she's talking about. She wouldn't even show him, and he asked her 3 times, and yet still it formed the basis of a negative decision of denial. We weren't given a fair process, but apparently my story is not the only one. Everybody, I feel a lot of us go through.
Guys, this is why the Fight to Reunite exists.
Yeah.
So that we can sit down and we can actually have these discussions to talk about what we're going through. And I know that everyone that's probably watching, and the people that will watch, I mean, they're saying, that is what I'm feeling. That is what I'm going through. Like Nadini, Helen, you're saying exactly what I've been experiencing. And I feel like I've been all alone because I don't have a platform. The officials aren't listening to me. I'm from a country where I can't speak out.
Yeah.
This platform exists to be the voice for all of those people, so that hopefully when the ministers and the MPs sit down and actually watch these videos, they can see that it's more than just what they see on the surface. It's more than what they hear in Parliament. There are actually people that are at home waiting to reunite. There are people that have spent, I mean, hundreds and thousands of dollars fighting, and there's no result. And while I agree, and while I understand that there's a process in place, while I understand that there's a lot of different, it's multifaceted immigration, it's very complex. So I can understand the difficulty that the government might have with managing the system, because let's face it, it's just not a liberal problem. It's been going on for years with the conservatives. I mean, we saw the sponsorship process was like 24 to 32 months, and the liberals actually improved it. And here, the nice thing about our platform is we're not political. Family advocate groups are not political. The Fight to Reunite is not political. But we're seeing that these inefficiencies exist, and we're saying to the Canadian government, this is what we're facing, and we're forming a group to help you, not even to criticize you, because, and I've said this to Jennifer, and I've said this to Vishal in my last segment, we don't exist to criticize the government, or we're not a political agenda. We're a family support group that has one goal, one mission and one goal, and that's to reunite families. And that's all we're asking for.
That's all we want.
We have to be honest, because it seems like the letter campaigns aren't working.
Right.
The emails aren't working. The protests aren't working, surprisingly. It works in the US, but it's not working here.
It doesn't work here, I can tell you.
It's not working. So
No,
all that's not working. If the stories aren't working, the only thing left for us to do is just to get on live YouTube and say, listen, and to explain in detail, call names, and say, this is how we're being treated. This is injustice. And as a Canadian citizen that have guaranteed rights, this is unacceptable. And obviously, from what we're talking about here, this seems like there's a lack of accountability when it comes to the office.
Absolutely.
There's a lack of
and that brings up the question of, like, you know, we asked for solutions, and Helen mentioned the exemptions as an immediate solution. As part of a medium and long-term solution, we've got to be starting to look at our immigration processes, and an inquest needs to be done. Honestly, a third-party objective inquest needs to be done, an inquiry into the systems and what's happening and how it impacts on the lives of these of us as citizens. And there needs to be some sort of watchdog, the way that we have an ombudsman for the province and an ombudsman for special processes. I believe an ombudsman or some type of watchdog is really needed, so that IRCC does what it says it's supposed to do and does things by the books in a consistent, transparent, accountable way, so that it doesn't harm the people like me and Helen and who we represent, which is thousands of others in this process.
Many in the same position.
I mean, and see, it doesn't make sense for me, even from a political standpoint, because you would think that Canadians are the ones, obviously, that votes, right? You would think that they would support you guys because, yes, I mean, we're in a situation, and I hate to say this, where it seems like refugees and students and workers are being given more rights and more pathways and more privileges than the people that are there build the country.
They really are.
And in addition to a review, right, that Helen's talking about, that you're talking about, there also needs to be a statement from the Prime Minister, because the mandate letter, I don't even know if there's a mandate letter that's been issued again, but the first mandate letter is obviously not being upheld.
Can I say something for you? Because there was a statement by our Prime Minister, and this was a statement at the beginning of his reign, and his views on family reunification. And so, in a way, by playing this, I want to challenge him to go back to his original word to the citizens of this country. And if you don't mind, I'm going to play that now if you can hear it. You can see from my thing, our Prime Minister.
We'll change that. A Liberal government will make family reunification at the core of its immigration policy, making it easier for families to be together here in Canada. We'll change.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So we have that, and we have his predecessor, which is his father, who has said, and he's done many great things in immigration as well, but we've got the late and honorable Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau saying openly, the state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation. And that is all that I want to sort of highlight. I can leave it there, but we have taken an about turn from what his predecessor had said, what he has said at the beginning of his campaign, where it filters down to the Minister of Immigration and to all of the workers who do tremendous jobs, and we don't want to be against them. It's just that we want to be also prioritized, treated fairly, given a fair process, not be discriminated against, and not be treated in such a way that is distrustful, when we have already shown on so many levels all the contributions that immigrants do make to the fabric of Canada, the fabric of this society, as well as what our husbands and wives can contribute coming in from all different regions, including visa-required countries.
This interview, I mean, it's so impactful, it's so informative, and we went way over an hour, but we have to get this in. These are important details that people need to hear, that needs to be shared, that needs to be said. And we're going to go to a quick commercial break. But when we come back, Helen and Nadini, I want to hear from you guys. We want to talk about obviously what the main goal is now, because like I've said this already, we're not here to change the world. We realize that the immigration system is flawed. It needs, to be overhauled. It needs to be reviewed. But right now, what we're fighting for is an immediate plan, because COVID isn't going anywhere anytime soon. They talk about vaccines and all of that, but obviously it's going to be with us for a while. Even if COVID is miraculously eradicated, families still are being denied. There's still a delay because let's face it, there's backlogs. That's a major issue. Backlogs is a major issue. Yes. So in order for us to have hope, and Vishal said this in the last segment, he said, we're going to have to stand united, and we're going to have to march and get this figured out now, because that is the only way we're going to have hope. Right? Yeah. People are hopeless. They don't know when they're going to receive answers. And if you just applied, I'm sorry for you, but you're not anywhere close to being reunited with your spouse. So there needs to be, like you said, there needs to be a discussion had, and there needs to be a review of the process to see where do we go from here? Because I've said this is a crisis. This is an emergency that we're in. Besides COVID, we're in a family crisis, and we need to do something, because a lot of people aren't faring well. A lot of people are now taking meds. They're seeing counselors. We know that SSA group actually shared hotlines and suicidal hotlines that people can reach out to, because there have been a few incidents that happened with people, obviously trying to take their own lives, and people that ended up, in the hospital and just making these videos and just basically acting out, right? So there's a mental health factor as well. So when we come back, we want to talk about where we're at, what it is we're asking for. What is the one thing we're asking for, and where could we go from here, but also where we're headed in terms of a group, and what we would like to see happen so that we move forward and not backwards. So you're watching The Fight to Reunite. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're having an amazing discussion. I wish we can just stay here all day and talk. This is amazing. You guys are going to be my contributors. We got to bring you back. We got to have another discussion about this as we go on to see. So we're going to go to a commercial break. We'll be right back after this. You're watching The Fight to Reunite.
Hey guys, Akeem Scott here. I just want to say thank you to everyone that continues to fight to reunite families. I want to say thank you to the admins of the various groups that are advocating on our behalf. This Friday, I'll be going live on my YouTube channel to talk about the immigration issue at length. And I invite all of you guys to be a part of that discussion. Join in and let's talk about it. Hey guys, Akeem Scott here with another video.
Welcome back to The Fight to Reunite. We're joined by Nadini and Helen. We're having an amazing discussion about family unification, family separation, what it means for Canadians, what it means for families around the world, where we're headed, where we're at right now, and what we need to do. And guys, right before the break, we were talking about some of the legalities and just, the policies that exist that are preventing families from reuniting. We were talking about the mental health aspect, the effect that it's having on Canadians, and we were talking about just possible solutions, immediate and long-term solutions that we can implement to ensure that families can reunite. And I said that obviously we wanted to talk about what is the goal. Could you just share with us what it is that we're fighting for? Because it seems like the people that have the ability to make the changes, they don't understand what we're asking for. They believe we're just making noise, but I mean, the message is pretty clear. What are we asking for?
It is. I think there's numerous things that we're fighting for. Firstly, you mentioned it before, Akeem. We're talking about backlog here. We're talking about people who are still waiting from 2017, 2018, early 2019, people who haven't received any updates, whether it's people that are still waiting for AORs, people that are still waiting to hear updates about the interview. The other thing in terms of more of the immediate is, if an announcement was made by the minister back in September about virtual interviews, why aren't these virtual interviews actually happening? We're almost 3 months in since that announcement. So in the immediate, in the event that these interviews do have to take place, we've been told that immigration officers from abroad, that the majority of them are back in Canada. These interviews can take place in Canada. Everybody has a computer, and computers can be, we've been told also that there's some security issues around doing these virtual interviews. Computers can be encrypted. So there's ways around it in terms of more of the immediate. The principal applicant can attend an embassy. Their documentation could be verified at the embassy, because we've been also told that one of the concerns about the virtual interviews is not being able to authenticate their documents and their identity. So these are some of the things like that could be done more so in the immediate. More so in and the other thing too is the exemptions with Voices for Families. Having people who have been through the process after a certain period of time, having these immigration officers revisit their applications and saying, you know what, perhaps there isn't a need for this interview after all. Or perhaps, you know, if I have additional questions, we can email the principal applicant and the sponsor and see if we can get those questions or concerns addressed. So these are just some of the things that can be done more so in the immediate, but what we're really asking for is an exemption overall with the interview process, as well as having people be granted permanent residency and to have the ability to be reunited with their partners. When we look at what other countries are doing as well, let's make a comparison of how immigration policies and procedures are working in other countries. As a person with dual citizenship, in Portugal, I can tell you that in the last couple of years, what has happened is their policies with immigration have changed with spouses. So now they have this thing called citizenship by marriage, where because I am a national of Portugal, I can apply for my husband through marriage to become a citizen as well. The process, I can tell you, I've looked into, because unfortunately, this is what happens with us as well. We lose so much hope in our own immigration process in our own country that we now have to start looking at other alternatives, because the reality is, for some of us, there's no guarantees that our partners are ever going to be reunited with us. We hope and we pray, but we just don't know what the future holds. So what we're starting to look at alternatives in terms of what if this doesn't actually happen for us.
And some people have actually had to leave Canada, which is unfortunate. Some people have actually had to take. I mean, there are many people that said, hey, like, we've seen on Twitter, we've seen videos, I've spoken to people who said, hey, I just don't know anymore. Like, I can't afford to leave my marriage. I have children. I have to go and live in the Middle East because I just don't know.
You just don't know.
That is a complete brain drain and counterproductive to the overarching immigration strategy for Canada, in the rate that we have one of the lowest birth rates of other countries. And you know, we do need people to fill all kinds of labor and skilled positions. And that's the reason why we had so many different streams coming in. So it's counterproductive that you've got good people who have approved sponsors who are now having to leave the country to reunite and possibly never return to Canada. And that's a loss for us as a nation. But I just want to piggyback onto what Helen said about what other countries are doing, because I think it's important for you to see, you know, what Helen has asked for in terms of the immediacy of removing, you know, interviews unless it's absolutely crucial as a point of national security. Then it's really not needed. And on top of that, exemptions for all. If you've passed through all the checks and balances, why are we sitting in queue waiting for a decision? So that to me would be immediate. But when you look at places in the longer term, like the USA, you know, we've even had a member who said he was able to meet up with his wife because he got a visa 5 years for the USA, where Canada refused to give him a visa. And in the USA, the fiancé visa as well is a different type of visa. Canada used to have that, and we've eliminated that program. For what reason, I have no clue. But they have a specialized visa that allows fiancés to come up, spend time, reunite, get to do a wedding in you know, the sponsor's country. All of the things that I had planned and never had a chance to do. We look at places, other first world nations like Italy. Italy has a long-term spousal stay visa. And the European Union and the UK passed a law. It's called the Surrender Singh Law, if you Google it, where families have the right to mobility. So spouses can get a family permit and are free to move around anywhere in a European Union nation or country, and be able to stay with their spouses and their families free and without penalty. That's the level of trust that I would like to see Canada aspire to. These countries are modern. They accommodate the realities of their citizens and their policies and their citizens' choices in a spouse. And as you know, we're a global nation that's changing. You're no longer going to just meet somebody at the corner. Even through COVID, you're going to be meeting people online. What are you going to do? Just decide that it's not a genuine relationship because it was an online meeting? This is a millennial generation, and it's a new generation as well.
People meet on Facebook and WhatsApp every day.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Relationships forge over Instagram, just by people making connections. So it's kind of crazy.
These callous, primitive, limited, subjective opinions on what is the criteria for determining genuineness needs a complete overhaul. It is disingenuous to the process. It puts us at undue hardship and risk. It hurts Canada on so many levels. It hurts its citizens on so many levels that we've already discussed here today. And so in the immediate solutions, if we've not provided enough evidence, like the minister and our prime minister, our minister of immigration and our prime minister of this country needs to hear what we're asking for and really act on it at the same way that they did when they had 25,000 Syrian refugees that they acted on in 2 months. 2 months they processed that, even went out and handed out jackets, and they're weighing on our social welfare system. And I don't want to pin one stream against the other. Believe me, I want to commend Canada for doing something like that. But while you are doing that, why can't you be the same humanitarian to your own citizens who are sitting here waiting years to have things processed in such distrust, yet still you pulled out people, in an unsystematic, inconsistent way without the same checks and balances and hoops that we've had to go through. And you processed that. You managed to process that in 2 months.
And don't forget, because there's an article that was just released on that a week ago that said 25,000 Syrian refugees in 100 days, highlighted the best of Canadian immigration. And I remember at that time, this was right at the beginning of their election, it was one of their campaign promises, but Canadians were saying they were concerned because of the national security risk that posed at the time. And then but the government was like, no, we can do it. Like they actually flew in people from different regions to help out with the processing of the applications. I also remember that they opened like facilities, mock facilities in different areas where they processed people over like a 24-hour period. They were saying that officers were being burnt out because that's how much they had to do in such a short amount of time to meet this goal, and they allocated the funding for it. They even flew, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they used the military aircrafts to fly into these places to pick up some of these people to ensure that they're in Canada. And the prime minister, the minister at the time, I forget his name, John McCallum, himself appeared at the airport and welcomed hundreds and hundreds of these people. And you would think that in a time like this, we should be seeing that same effort for families.
Absolutely.
The airport, we should be seeing, like I said, our mission is not complete until Toronto Pearson Airport is flooded with families waiting in line to be processed, right? That is what we want to see. Because COVID is the only difference between now, here in 2020 and 2021, compared to back then in 2015. That is the only factor. And then they say, well, we can't prioritize family sponsorship because of COVID. But we're seeing that you're doing it for everyone else. You're doing it for refugees because refugees are still coming in.
Absolutely.
We're seeing it for students. We're seeing it for workers. So obviously it could be done. So
and they keep going back to the same policy of, well, we're going to do 6,000 a month and 49,000. Yet still they're not transparent about it. They're not being accountable. And nowhere in there are they talking about the real family reunification that's needed, which is outland spousal sponsorship, separation in the middle of COVID.
Comfort. But at the same
you
time,
cannot tell us.
But the same
how many of us are getting processed? We're not seeing it. We're not seeing it.
When we ask you to provide the stats, we don't get the stats. We hear it's going to be provided next meeting. It's going to be provided.
And we're still being denied TRVs. We're still being told we're put on hold. So it is a never-ending vicious cycle of wait, repeat. When we were denied, we were told by a lawyer, you better reapply and reapply quickly because an appeal takes longer than a reapplication. So when your entire system is skewed like that, where your appeal process takes way longer than a reapplication, and then you've got appeal judges telling you that having a child is not a symbol of genuineness in a relationship, you really feel like you're in a never-ending pit hole that you can never climb out of. So hence the reason we're pushing the immediacy of exemption, because you know, we tried the special TRV route. We're getting turned down at every which way. You said 49,000. We're not seeing it. It's not impacting us. You're still delaying us with interviews and virtual interviews that are not even happening. And we already proved this interview process is callous and disingenuous and does not help anyway in eliminating the risk that's faced by Canada, and not necessary for determining genuineness. I just feel like something more has to be done. And while we're waiting on this, somebody somewhere out there has to be an inquest in the way that IRCC are handling individual and general files and how they compare against different streams, so that you can see where outland visa required countries and spousal sponsorships compared to everyone else, and the atrocities that we have to go through as Canadian citizens as a result of that. And a watchdog implemented.
I certainly agree. And there has to be more, even just besides, you know, there has to be intervention. That's what I want to say.
Yes.
There also has to be intervention, an immediate intervention by the highest office, the office of the Prime Minister, to say something is wrong. Obviously, at the ministry level, the ministerial level is not being solved. There needs to be a directive given to explain to Canadians why are we in this situation, and also what are we going to do about it. Because when 25,000 refugees enter this country in 100 days, I don't even know how they pull that off. I'm still trying to figure that out, but they did it.
But they did it to be done, right?
So obviously, 6,000 applications a month is not enough, because if it was enough, you would have done that for the 25,000 refugees. You could have just brought them in 6,000 at a time, but you chose to bring in 25,000 in 100 days. You know what is 100 days? That means by what? Not even like before summer, all of us, well, not all of us, but a lot of us would be reunited. 25,000 applications, family class applications being expedited in 100 days would alleviate backlogs and would help other people that just applied to move forward quicker. So that is the plan I want to see happen. If you can make it happen for the refugees, you can certainly make it happen for families. And in fact, families, in my opinion, and I've said this a lot of times, family is priority. When it comes to the immigration system, I don't care what anyone says. And I would go on record for saying this. Families is priority.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that refugees are less than us. It doesn't mean that you know, students are less, because obviously they contribute to the economy, temporary workers, but families are priority. If there's an emergency crisis or a situation that's going on, your main objection should be families in the outland. They're going to be priority. They have children that are waiting on their fathers, right? And I believe that parents, I know groups haven't talked about it, but I certainly believe that the parents and grandparents program is a part of our fight too, because they're also immediate families.
Right.
And they're also facing difficulties. So I want to say that when it comes to the family class stream that encompasses all of us, there needs to be an immediate plan, just like we saw with the Syrian refugees. We need an emergency implementation to see families, hundreds and thousands, being reunited in the next 100 days. And I believe that we should start a Twitter campaign about that. We should tweet about that. We want to see 5,000 families reunited in the next 100 days.
Right. We need to question why these TRVs are still being denied even after an announcement was made, because in the immediate, that would be an immediate solution right now.
That would.
We're still seeing them denied. So what is that really saying? What is our government really saying to us? That we're not priority?
We're not.
And we need to become priority, because obviously we cannot continue to go. I mean, how much more, like you said in your video, how much more could people take? We're going into the new year. We're literally days away from the new year. We're entering Christmas this week. Families are not reunited. We're entering 2021. How much longer can we go like this?
Right. Well, the system also banks on the fact that relationships are going to be destroyed as a result of this, and people are going to part ways. I can tell you that after my first application was denied, we contemplated filing an appeal, and we actually did. We were only about a month or two into the process, and then we withdrew it because we were advised, as Nadini said, that the appeal process is actually going to take a lot longer than just reapplying again altogether, which is what we did. But I just want to highlight this. I received a call from an immigration officer in the appeal division, and her first question was, "Are you and your husband still together?" And I thought it was quite a bizarre question to ask. And I actually said to her, "That's a strange question. Why would you ask me that?" And she's like, "Because a lot of people end up going their separate ways once they've been denied." So what does that say? That they expect that this process, the hardship of this process, is actually going to destroy relationships. And it does. Unfortunately and sadly, it really does for some people.
That's not a good thing. That's not a good
It's
thing.
not a good thing.
While
It's
you
not a
might,
good
they might be thinking, okay, we're gonna be able to weed out, the bad apples from the good people. It destroys genuine marriages as well. So you're creating more damage than good. And don't forget that a lot of these families, people have children, right? So that children going through separation, which is not a good thing. It's not good at any level. It's not good. So there's a bigger issue. That I think that's what it comes down to, is that we're in a situation where there's a big issue that's on the horizon, and I believe that intervention is needed very quickly. We cannot go another day with the current policies and practices that are being seen. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Immigration, maybe even the Attorney General of Canada needs to intervene and really look at the policies, and to say that, is this discriminatory? Is this illegal? And I would even go as far as to say is that the human rights, the United Nations, right? They would need to probably get involved, because what are they saying about this? When it comes to refugees, they have a lot to say, right? Humanitarian efforts around the world, we're big on that. But families right now are in a situation and they need help, and we're asking for that help. And that's all we're asking for.
Yeah.
So I certainly agree with you guys. And wow, 1 hour 55 minutes. 10 minutes. We're gonna go. So I think we're gonna take one more commercial break. When we come back, we're gonna wrap up. Any last thoughts? We're gonna talk about what families can do if they're in this situation, they don't know where to turn, how they can reach out to support groups. What are some plans that you guys are? What are you planning to do moving into this new year in terms of with your family life, but also on a group level? Some initiatives or maybe some goals that you hope to see happen. We're going to talk all about that when we come back on the Fight to Reunite. Guys, this has been amazing. We're definitely going to have another interview for sure. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Fight to Reunite. We're just wrapping up here. There's so much that we covered today, and I want to say to all the viewers, if you're just tuning in, you need to watch from the beginning. Don't skip any second of this video, because everything that Nadini, Helen have been saying is so true. There's a lot of information that you do need to know what's going on with your application. There's a lot of information that I think would be useful to a lot of people to better understand what is happening behind the scenes and to know how they can move forward, especially if you're uncertain. There's so much wrapped up into this interview, and we could not cover it all. We're going to have more episodes to talk about different angles of this, but we're joined by Nadini and Helen, who are members of Voices for Families as well. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter. They're all over social media. You can find them maybe even on YouTube. I don't know if you guys have a YouTube channel, but go and reach out to SSA, reach out to Faces of Advocacy, all of these support groups. They're here for you. Just amazing work, guys. Right before the break, we were obviously talking about just more of family reunification and what needs to happen. I want to ask you, obviously a lot of people are going through mental health difficulties right now. What are some coping strategies for people that are, having a hard time? How could people get through this time together? Is there any strategies they can maybe use, or is there any tips or recommendations you would share?
I can say for myself, one of the biggest coping mechanisms that I've had is the support of people from the group. I know that there's an actual support line for people and a support group. I'm not sure if it's through Voices for Families or SSA, but I have seen it. But I can say the biggest coping mechanism for me has been people like Nadini and other members of the group that I've been able to reach out to, vent to, express my frustrations to, because unless you're going through this process, it is undescribable. As much as my family and my friends are a great source of support, they still don't understand what I'm dealing with, what my partner is dealing with, and what our lives are like on day to day. So for me, the biggest support, it has been other members in the group. And I strongly encourage that if people are struggling, whether it's mentally, physically, that they reach out to some other members, because I think we're a great source of support for one another. And that's what has seemed to work for me and has worked well for me. I don't know, Nadini, have you had any?
Well, I echo that. I mean, I wouldn't like to say that I'm tied to any one group. There's so many out there, and I get involved as much as possible, whether it's Voices for Families or spousal sponsorship or any of the other streams. There's always good initiatives going on, and good people who you can talk to, who are not just sponsors in this country, but applicants in other countries. I would say that, for me, I've taken up on just a personal level doing Zoom exercise just to get me going and having something to look forward to on a daily basis. And that's helping me in terms of physically being able to cope, and especially in COVID, and having set times that I, without a doubt, reach out with my husband, unite, watch Netflix. We both share an account, and we schedule time to watch movies together as if we were right in the same room together. So there's all those things that you do, and make short milestones that you could reach together, and to not lose faith. Whatever you do, this process is going to try to take you down. That is probably sometimes what we feel they want us to do.
Yeah.
Don't lose faith. Believe in your marriage, believe in your relationship, believe in your love, because all of us have love stories that need to be told and that need to be completed. And we just want to ensure that by being able to show that and repeat that over and over, somewhere along the line, maybe one person starts, but a whole movement of us can create enough impact to say, Canada, you can do better. Please do better.
And that's exactly what groups are calling for Canada to do better. Voices for Families, SSA, have released numerous statements asking for the government to simply do better. They say that the current, policies and the current practices we're seeing are unacceptable. They are calling for immediate exemptions to be released. We know that Voices for Families was key to that, initiative of calling for exemptions. SSA have released numerous statements and policy proposals that could be implemented. So guys, you have hit
and anyone who wants to be part of that initiative, if you go on the Voices for Family Facebook page too, they have the impact statements that they would like everybody, it doesn't matter whom it is, fill it out. Don't be fearful. I mean,
please fill it out.
We're showing it all. We've done it as well.
Yeah, we have.
For those exemptions, so that we have a lot more that can go in front of our politicians to let them know that, look, there's more than just a few of us. It's an entire movement of us.
It's strength in numbers, right, Nadini? It's strength in numbers. So the more people fill it out, the stronger we have in terms of presenting it in front of these committees. So we need to bind together as a group and support one another.
Yeah,
I'm pushing. I want to see 25,000 families in 100 days. That's my goal. I want to see that.
I'd love to see that.
That's a really good slogan.
I'm going to keep
Prime Minister, 25,000. We're
going to create signs, 25,000 family applicants.
In 100 days.
In 100 days. It could be done. It could be done.
If you don't want to give us TRVs, if you don't want to give us exemptions, bring us home in 100 days. Exactly. And there has been some good stories. I want to mention that SSA member, Mariana, she was reunited with her family. She posted on Twitter that, she landed in Canada. She tweeted that this is what Canadians, this is what families deserve. So there are good stories happening, and we want to highlight those as well. This is not just not about the negative, but we want to highlight the stories that's happening, and people are being reunited. Maybe not at the pace we want to see it, but it's happening, and we want this to be the reality for thousands of other immigrants this Christmas and this New Year. That's what we're calling for.
Yeah.
Guys.
So in closing, I guess I just want to tell whomever's listening out there, and if it is our Prime Minister and our Minister, you're getting to wake up with your family on Christmas Day, and that must be a really nice feeling. I'm celebrating my wedding anniversary, which is this Saturday here in Canada by myself for the second time in a row. So I'm just really like, I just want to say, if you can understand and put yourselves in our shoes and stop distrusting and start operating from a ground of compassion, you will know inherently what the right thing is to do.
And Helen,
I was just going to say in closing, trust in us, trust in our decision making, trust in our spouses, so that we have the ability to trust in you and in your government.
And I just want to say, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I know that your stories amplify the voices of many. It's a story of pain and distraught, but also of resilience and hope. And I believe that you two are a beacon of hope to your country, to the thousands of Canadians that are actually facing this reality but don't know what to do, don't know where to turn. I do believe that you guys are that shining light for them in this difficult time. So I just want to say thank you for your advocacy, thank you for your work, thank you for your honesty and your and just being relentless and willing to do whatever is necessary, even if it's just coming on live and, you know, exposing yourself in some ways, sharing the truth and the facts. Thank you so much for that, because there's a lot of people that are watching these videos and they do not have a voice and they're hopeless. But being able to know that there are people that are speaking up on their behalf is, I mean, it's going to be memorable. It's going to be something that Canadians remember for years and years to come. And when we're all reunited with our families, they will be forever grateful to you guys, to all the groups, and to everyone fighting for what you're doing. And I say, you know, to the government, please, all we're asking for, we're not, like Faces of Advocacy have said, we're not asking for open borders. We're just asking for families to be together. And I think that is exactly what we're asking for. We're not asking to break the laws. We're not asking for, you know, some policies that are not realistic. Everything that we have asked for is reasonable, it's legal, and I think it's going to be beneficial to the long-term success of our nation. So we're asking, you know, the powers that be, the government, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Immigration, we're just asking you to please just prioritize family sponsorship. That's our hashtag. You've seen it. It's on Twitter. It's all over the internet. You cannot miss it. Like, you know that we're calling for the government to prioritize family sponsorship, but also, you know, to act on it now. We cannot wait another 6 months, another even 3 months. We need answers now. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today on the Fight to Reunite. It was an interesting discussion, and we're certainly going to schedule another one because there's so much more to talk about.
Sure. And thank you, Akeem, for having us.
Happy holidays, guys. We're praying. We're all praying. I'm praying for all of us that we would be reunited soon, that this would be history, and we would be able to move on with our families and start our lives together. And I believe that will happen. I've said this to Vishal. I've said this to Jennifer. I've said this to a lot of the members from different groups. The one question I ask is, do we have hope? And there's mixed opinions on that, but I've said we do have hope. And I do believe that we will reunite. It's just a matter of time. But we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that we expedite that time so that we're reunited soon. And then maybe we can have a reunion.
Yeah.
You know, get together somehow. So, you know, I believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's coming, guys. Keep praying. Keep your heads up. Like Helen and Nadini has said, keep your heads up. Keep the fight going. We're going to reunite with our families.
We will.
So you guys, I want everybody watching today just to have a good day. Just remember that we will reunite.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Akeem.
Bye, everybody.
All of us, you're watching the Fight to Reunite. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye.